You're listening to a fight against free kill laws from AMP Media Production Studio.
Welcome to the Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we give a voice to those who have suffered firsthand from medical malpractice. In Florida, families devastated by medical negligence are left without justice because of a law many don't even know exists. Florida's free kill law prevents families from holding doctors accountable. These are real stories with real loss and no justice. Contact Ed at 561-239-2417 or visit afreekill.com. Today we uncover the truth, share real stories, and demand change.
Good evening, friends, and thank you again for taking the time to join in and listen to our podcast. As most of you know who are regulars with us, our efforts again this year didn't make it across the finish line. In fact, we fell a little shorter than we did last year. In a very disappointing way, the Senate refused to allow the bill to even be heard on any of the committees in the Senate. We've identified some of the reasons for this, and we are evaluating what we need to do for the next year to come in with a little bit different, a little bit stronger approach, and to get us a better outcome. To help give us some detail and some clarity on what happened and what we'd like to do, we're glad to have Lauren Korniyenko, the executive director of the Florida Medical Rights Association, as our guest tonight. So can we bring Lauren in, please? Hey, Lauren.
Hi there, Ed. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so very much for joining us. I know how busy you are. So if you could give us kind of a recap of what happened in the legislative session this year.
Okay, well, we were coming back with the effort to repeal the so-called Florida free kill law after last legislative session. So for those who may not know, in May of last year, Governor DeSantis vetoed the repeal bill that made it through both the House and the Senate with about 93% of legislators voting in support of repealing the Florida free kill law. So huge amount of bipartisan support across the board, Republicans and Democrats alike. The governor vetoed it in a large veto press conference, standing beside lobbyists, saying that he was doing that because the bill failed to have caps on the amount of damages families could collect in the case of a malpractice judgment or a malpractice award. So that was in May 2025. The House Speaker Perez indicated that the bills would be brought back for another conversation in this legislative session. And so the House came out very strong. They came very quickly out with their repeal bill. It hit committee in the very early weeks of the committee weeks, even before session had formally opened. It passed both House committees with strong support, and then it was scheduled for the House floor review the very first week of the legislative session. So again, the House signaling that this was something very important to them, and they were prioritizing it, and it passed the House floor vote with very strong bipartisan support. So at that point, the repeal effort had two ways forward. It could, the House bill was sent to the Senate and slated for the Rules Committee And then the Senate Bill 1700, which was sponsored by Senator Brawl, could also be taken up and moved through 3 committees before it would make it to the Senate floor vote.
And there were
So,
8 other, excuse me, Lord, there were 8 other senators that co-sponsored it, correct?
yes, so both the House and the Senate bills had strong bipartisan support, both in the votes, but also in the co-sponsorships.
Right.
So we had Republicans and Democrats, both representatives and senators, signing on to co-sponsor that. So it was a pretty strong showing. And if you look at a lot of the bills that made their way through, this was a really strong showing for those bills.
So
And
what
then
happened when it
at
was time for it to?
Yeah, so at that point we're waiting, and we waited quite a long time, several weeks, waiting to find out when these bills were going to be heard. We had advocates reaching out to the Senate chair of the Judiciary Committee, which is Senator Yarbrough. He was the one who sponsored last session's repeal bill in the Senate. And we were assured, our advocates were assured, that he still supported the repeal effort and the bill would be heard in committee. And week after week, advocates called, did not get additional information, and lo and behold, he announced in his last committee session that was the last committee session, and there would be no more bills coming through his committee.
And did he have an explanation?
No,
Did he have
and
an
we didn't
explanation?
No. At the time he didn't. We had a advocate reach out multiple times, and it was only after media engaged his office that he said that because of the governor's veto, it doesn't appear that this is going to be prioritized to be moving forward. At that time, we understood that the House bill could still possibly make it through with rules. So advocates engaged that chair, which is Senator Pasadomo, to request that it be heard. In our view, both these bills, the repeal effort has been going on multiple years. It passed overwhelmingly with overwhelmingly bipartisan support, and the efforts to attach caps to those bills failed. And so that effort failed. That should be a done discussion. These bills should be able to move forward on their own merits. And we didn't get any responses. And those senators, when we reached out to both Pasadomo's office and Senator Albright's office, there was no response and no engagement.
Do you suppose that we could read into this? I'll just say this is my opinion. If they're going to say in advance that they weren't going to push it any further because they could see no reason for the outcome to be any different than it was last year, and it wasn't worth spending Senate time on it, if that was the case, then aren't they really telling us that even if there was a majority of a 2/3 majority or more that would vote to overturn it, that the Senate would not look for an override? They would not pursue an override of a veto?
I think that is the message that is being underwritten in those statements. Because frankly, when you have so many legislators saying, yes, this is something that needs to be addressed, this is a historical wrong in our legislation, we need to make this change to improve patient safety and ensure that we're making sure that everybody has access to their constitutional rights, it should be a very simple fix. The fact that so many people voted in favor of it, the governor vetoed it, didn't meet with any families to discuss or hear our side. We heard from a lot of lobbyists. This would be the prime example of just when a veto override should be done. And that's what we expected last session. They failed to do that. And essentially, what they were signaling is that the Senate, at least, was not prepared to do that. And when we say the Senate, we mean the Senate leadership, right? So that would
And
be
that
Senator
brings us,
Albright, those other kind of senior leaders in that segment.
well, that kind of brings us right into the next thing. You know, and I'll say again, this is my opinion, not necessarily the opinion of the station. But it just seems to me that if they will not take action to override, then I've got to suspect that not just the governor, but these key senators have also been influenced by lobbyists. That would be my guess.
Yes. You don't need to guess. You can simply look at the public records and see that was happening. So, we went ahead and we requested the public records of discussions on these bills, which any citizen can do.
How can they do that?
And what we found,
Excuse me,
go and
I'm
you
sorry.
submit a public records request with the House or with the Senate. And we can speak offline about that, but anybody can do that. Reporters do that on a regular basis. In fact, I believe it was Katie LaGrone that did something similar at the end of session and found that the governor received close to 7,000 emails from Floridians asking about this bill. And out of those 7,000 letters, the majority of them were citizens asking him to please sign the bill and not veto it. So you can do that. You can get some valuable insights. And so, we do that just like I assume the lobbyists are doing that. And what we can see is that the lobbyists are engaging them on this issue. They were writing amendments to the bills, that they were shopping around with what they considered to be, the senators that would be willing to work on their behalf. We saw them sending emails to senators, let's say not work emails, all right? So either their private emails, their personal businesses, probably as a way to make it more difficult for any kind of oversight to see what these individuals are doing behind the scenes. So they're sending it to their not work emails in a way to get the legislation in place that they wanted. And so, that obviously raises questions that, why. I think we went through a scandal maybe about 10 years ago with somebody's also not work email,
Rings a bell, doesn't it?
how they were using their personal, emails so that people couldn't look and, see what they were doing. And ultimately, legislators have to answer to the people, not to lobbyists, not to companies. They answer to their constituents. And so when you see them kind of doing all these little tricks to make it more difficult to answer, for them to have to answer to the people, or at least avoid having to answer to the people, that's a problem, right? So, but I think to understand what happened this session. So effectively, those bills, they stalled in the Senate, and now essentially they are, what we would say is, they're likely dead. There may be a few more weeks left in session, but they've signaled these aren't going to be their priority. So in order to understand why those bills have stalled and died, we have to understand what actually happened last session and what was the goal, right? So Florida free kill law has been on the books now for 36 years. Families have been showing up year after year after year saying, repeal this. My family member fell into this category. They died a preventable death due to somebody's negligence. I want to hold somebody accountable, and I don't even have the right to bring a a case to the court because they fell into this category. Um, Last session, the repeal bills moved through both the House and the Senate very quickly. Overwhelming support, as we talked about. The House floor vote was emotional. It was kind of, it had this historic uh, uh, feeling to it. Lawmakers acknowledged the families that had come and were sitting in the gallery who traveled to Tallahassee to be there for that historic vote. They met with them after the bill passed. The Senate leadership, after those bills moved through committee, then delayed moving the bill to the Senate floor vote
Right.
for weeks without explaining to anybody why there was a delay. And then we had just days before the final week of session, Senator Harrell introduced her caps amendment. So that, again, the caps are a limit that would be written back into law of if a family successfully brings a case against somebody for medical malpractice, it says you can only collect this much. Even if the jury says, there were 5 people involved, 5 doctors, 20 nurses, whatever, you can only have this amount. And the caps limits were quite low. They went from 500,000 to 750,000, and then just over a million. And so I know some listeners may hear that and go, that seems reasonable. Those are caps on pain and suffering. So let me explain to you that these repeal bills were to basically make sure that people who were wrongful death victims and their families could have access to the courts in the case of their wrongful death. These amendments went beyond wrongful death cases to put a cap on any person who had any kind of malpractice, whether they survived or whether they died. So let's just, be very honest. There are people who have catastrophic injuries due to malpractice. I know personally somebody who lost all 4 limbs because of malpractice. Let's ask ourselves, in those cases, are these lowball caps sufficient to address their pain and suffering? Most likely, I think most of us would say no, right? And so we, the families that showed up, said, you want to run caps, run it as a separate bill. We are here advocating on behalf of people who will lose a loved one in a
Loss of
hospital or
life.
loss of life. We are just trying to get restore their constitutional rights to be able to access the court. And what was happening on the side is that a small handful of senators were using the bill as a vehicle to restore caps back into Florida law. So just so everybody knows, we've had in the state of Florida, we had caps on 2 different time periods. We had caps in I think it was about 1986, 1987. They were quickly overturned by the Florida Supreme Court, and then they were reinstituted in 2003, and they stayed on the books until 2014 and 2017. 2 different rulings overturned them. Okay, so the Florida Supreme Court ruled on 3 separate rulings that caps were unconstitutional, and all they did was serve to benefit the wrongdoers at the expense of the people who suffered the most, right? So my family, go ahead, Ed.
No, I was just probably the same thing you were going to say. In 2009, when my son died, the cap was $100,000. Now, at that time, I was told that it would take at least $200,000 to bring the case to court. By the time you have expert witness, appeals process, motions, whatever they call it, all these different things the lawyers do. By the time we finally got to court, it would be just overwhelming. The expense would be overwhelming.
Right, right. And these cases are very expensive. They take oftentimes many years to work their way through court. You have to hire a lot of people to work them. Sometimes they are made more difficult because individuals with blatantly obvious negligence refuse to settle and they drag them out for years. All that costs money. So when you put a cap on, an attorney has to go, can I recover sufficient to recoup my costs to just bring this case? Or is this cap going to make it so difficult that the amount of money that it's going to cost me to bring the case is going to not make this a economically feasible case? And
Right.
so that's why the Florida Supreme Court overturned these caps,
And rightly so.
because they understood that.
Mhm.
And that's why the families, my family, many other families, free kill families, said, we're not showing up for that. So Senator Harrell brought her amendment. She got a significant amount of blowback. She withdrew her amendment. And then we had Senator Yarbrough, after running a clean bill all through 3 committees, about 15, 20 minutes before the bill went to the Senate floor, he added his amendment with caps, which were slightly higher. And fortunately, because advocates had done enough work beforehand, engaging lawmakers, we had a majority in the Senate who voted down Senator Yarbrough's cap. Unfortunately, that was not the playbook. It was not supposed to go that way.
Yeah.
They were anticipating that they were going to get the caps written back into law. And so, because his amendment failed, he immediately tabled the bill.
Just stonewalled it and let it die.
Well, no, he didn't let it die. He pulled it, and he could bring it back, but he wasn't going to let it vote at that point. And we stayed there for another day and sat in the Senate gallery until they brought it back, and they did bring it back, and they did vote on it, and it passed as a clean repeal. Thank goodness.
Okay, could we, in the time we have left, could we kind of address some of the objections that the lobbyists proposed? And you can explain to
Yes,
the viewers
I
how ridiculous
think-
they are.
Yes. Yes.
Excuse
So
me, Gabe.
what I
Gabe,
want-
can you put up the screenshot of the executive summary, please? Okay, go ahead, Lauren. Lauren? Oh. Okay, go ahead and bring it down. I'm sorry. I thought you could talk while you had that up. But what we can do
I
is
think
everything that
that-
Lauren's going to be talking about, that information, I'll make sure that it's available on my website, and if we can get it on the FMRA website, so the viewers can take a look at it.
So I think it's really important for your viewers to understand that the reason why the bill failed last session, or not failed, the reason why the governor vetoed it, and the reason why Senate leadership refused to allow it to be heard this session is that these repeal bills were never for those individuals, for the governor, for Senator Albright and some of these other senior leaders in the Senate. The repeal bill was never about restoring access to the courts for individuals who have been denied it under the free kill law. They were using the repeal bill as a vehicle to put caps back into law. And so you had families who were essentially duped into showing up to testify in favor of these bills. And they thought they were doing the right thing. And we were, right? We were showing up so that other Floridians, other people didn't have to go through what we went through, which is losing someone in malpractice and finding out you have no right to do anything about it, and the state of Florida is going to look the other way.
Right.
And instead, these other individuals were playing for basically the crown jewel of tort reform, right? So, tort reform is all these different ways to limit people's ability to bring cases against other individuals in a court of law. And so, there are a variety of different measures that can be done for tort reform, but the crown jewel of all of them is caps. They are highly valuable to the healthcare and insurance industries. And so in the past, when we had the caps, the governors of the state of Florida established a task force to look at the claims of the healthcare and insurance industries about whether or not we actually should do this. All right. And it was a large task force, many months long, lots of experts. They came in and they examined all those claims. So, what happened last session is that Governor DeSantis broke from that precedent. He supported or basically pushed these senators to institute a last minute effort to add on a caps amendment without any kind of independent review, any kind of evaluation of the lobbyist claims,
Economic
and
impact or anything like that.
right, and essentially just push it through, bypassing all committee discussion, essentially without any debate. And Floridians have to ask themselves. So first of all, that's how we got free kill in the first place. It was essentially an amendment, and I think it was Governor Martinez at the time. He didn't even sign that bill, right? It just became law. He didn't even sign it. So
if I remember right, subsection 8 was kind of slipped in after the vote.
right, it was slipped in. So they did basically the same thing with the caps amendment by bypassing all precedent. And so Floridians have to ask themselves, like, if this was really good for us, if the legislators are truly doing this to benefit us, why is it being done in secret? Why is it being done at the last minute, bypassing all open discussion? Well, I think we all know the answer to that. Right? It's not for your benefit, it's for their benefit. And it's highly lucrative. And it's frankly would probably be way more lucrative for them than the free kill law ever was. Right? So,
Sure.
Fortunately, a bipartisan majority of senators voted against the cap amendment and defeated it. And then what the governor received was a clean repeal, and signing that would basically take off the table this this effort that then could be used for caps in future sessions. And so we have what we have, right? So that's how we got stuck with this for the 36th year.
Okay, in the few minutes we have left, Lauren, what would you advise people to, what as a group, what do we need to do next year that we didn't do this year?
So I think that there are a variety of things that we can do. I'm not going to outline all of it right now because I think that's stuff that we can work behind the scenes quietly on.
Okay.
What I will say is that the people of Florida need to understand that some legislators, and when I say some, I mean a very small portion, right? Because we had all of the House sponsors, all of the Senate sponsors, those individuals really want to, I believe, see this law repealed. They really did what they could to move the needle forward in that regard. But you have a small group of individuals who are doing the bidding of industry lobbyists, and they're doing it at the expense of their constituents.
And they happen to be committee chairmen.
Some of them are committee chairmen, some of them are not committee chairmen, but I would tell individuals that they need to engage their representatives and their senators and say, this is unacceptable. Stop selling our rights. We say that we're the free state of Florida. We say that we believe in constitutional rights for all, and that's the reason why our founding fathers gave them to us, because they understood that if they didn't enshrine them, the bigger, the more powerful, the wealthy would take advantage of those who don't have those things.
Right.
And that's why the free kill families keep showing up saying it's time to repeal this law. Unfortunately, we have a few individuals who are directing a lot of things behind the scenes that are not, in this regard, I can't speak for everything, but in this regard, they are not looking out for their constituents' interests. And they should be called into account for that. They should be answering to their constituents and not big business.
Absolutely. All right, well, we're out of time. We're going to have to maybe have a part 2. Lauren, thank you so very, very much. I know how tight your time is. I deeply appreciate everything you do, as do all the members of the Florida Medical Rights Association. And one last thought I'd like to leave you with. I have heard that the American Medical Association may be considering, if not they already are not, lobbying other states to do something like what Florida has done, if just for their own benefit. So to the viewers we have, and the viewers that I know of in Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, look and be aware, get involved, find out what's going on, and stay tuned in to what's going on with your state legislature, because this horrible, horrible law could be coming to a hospital near you. All right, thank you very much for your time, folks. Very much appreciated. And we're going to be off for a couple of weeks, but I'll give you some notice when we come back. Oh, and that screenshot that we showed that we weren't able to keep up very long, that information on that, the claims that the lobbyists make and our rebuttal to those claims, it's a very interesting reading. We'll be sure that goes up on the websites too, okay? All right, good night, y'all. Love you. Thank you very much.
Imagine this. A loved one, a son or a daughter, has just suffered from a life-threatening accident. They are transported to a state trauma hospital, and despite being in the care of professional physicians, they tragically pass away due to preventable medical errors. As if this was not tragic enough, then finding out that legal statutes in the state of Florida devalue your loved one's life to zero. This is what we are fighting against. Come join Edward Salazar as he discusses the issues surrounding free kill laws and how to resolve them. Catch The Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar on Monday, 5 p.m. on all social media. Learn who we are and join our cause today. Thank you for watching The Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we interview those who have dealt firsthand with medical malpractice. Families are devastated by medical malpractice and left with no justice. This isn't just a loophole. It's a failure to protect the ones we love. It's time to change the law. It's time for accountability. Contact your state legislatures, visit afreekill.com for more information on how to help, or contact Ed at 561-239-2417. Because every life should matter.
You're listening to A Fight Against Free Kill Laws from AMP Media Production Studio.